Now, the deadline for political parties to form a new government is fast approaching as negotiations on the ANC's proposed Government of National Unity continue. Let's get Cosatu's take now on the proposed Government of National Unity with Matthew Parks, who's Cosatu's parliamentary coordinator. Matthew, a pleasure to have you on the program this afternoon. Well, firstly, we understand that you're going to have a meeting with the Alliance on the Government of National Unity, or this proposal. When are you meeting, firstly, and what is Cosatu's position?
Yeah, good afternoon. Thanks for having us. Look, we appreciate the ANC is under huge pressures, as is the rest of the country, because there's very clear, quite tight time frames. We basically have 14 days when the elections are certified to the National Assembly sitting, swearing in members of Parliament and electing the President, which must basically be done by next week. We have had an Alliance Secretariat on Monday. We've had several internal discussions as Cosatu with the national leadership, also with our affiliates as well over this week. We hope to meet with the Alliance, the ANC and the SACP quite soon in the next day or so, just to kind of basically concretize a common Alliance position, to show we have one common stance as the ANC, Cosatu, the SACP. Also just to raise our concerns and some of our thoughts and suggestions around what are the different modalities that we could look at for a government of national unity. The ANC has pronounced that it wants a GNU as the leading party in Parliament. So I think we just need to now look at, how exactly would it be constituted? Will all parties be involved? Will it be a question of parties who reach a certain threshold? Is there a certain policy prescription that parties should adhere to? And of course, also once you put in place the GNU, how will we manage it as well? Because now you're not dealing with one political party, you might be dealing with 3, 4, 5 parties. It depends on the formulation. But we do need to find a way just to ensure the stability. Equally, we also need to ensure that this is not a gathering of parties for positions, because we've seen it happening in municipal level at great cost. Those municipal councils have been quite unstable. They've come at the sacrifice of service delivery. And I think as a trade union federation, we really want to make sure the key principles are put in place before we allocate positions. Make sure it's stable, make sure it's coherent. It's based upon progressive principles, adherence to the Constitution, the rule of law, accelerating the fight against crime and corruption, the campaign for renewal. And of course, because we're a trade union federation as well, it must be about respecting workers' rights. We can't agree to a situation where workers' rights could be under threat. So I think for us, those are the critical issues.
I want to continue with this theme of understanding Cosatu's position, of course, on the ANC's proposals for this government of national unity, or at least its intention to establish a government of this form. Tell us what key principles should guide the party's decision-making process. You've already started alluding to this.
Yeah, so look, number one, I think the country needs stability. I think this is why the ANC has taken a decision to have an inclusive government of national unity. Not quite dissimilar to what we had in 1994. I think the motivation is that the challenges facing South Africa, whether it's workers, whether it's ordinary residents, whether it's the economy or the state, are immense, and we all need to contribute to resolving them. And I think we can have appetite for that kind of a position, given a 41% unemployment rate, the levels of crime and corruption, and so forth. I think for us also it's about making sure that we have to have the basics right. It can't be a question of, do political parties agree to the Constitution? And in a normal society, yes, there shouldn't be even a question, but we see many political parties openly choosing to say they will scrap the Constitution. I think for us that's a no-go. We've also seen some political parties and politicians who have got very unhealthy relationships with the rule of law. And we are emerging from the decade of state capture and corruption. We felt the pain as workers from that decade. We would not want to countenance going back to it. But look, we are a trade union federation, and we've seen political parties during the election campaign, and even before the elections, during the time in Parliament, saying that they will scrap the labour laws, the minimum wage, the right to collective bargaining, and so forth. And that for us is something we couldn't agree to as a trade union federation. No worker would agree to seeing their rights being thrown out the window. We also do come from a painful past of apartheid and so forth. And so over the past 30 years, we've gone down the transformation journey, whether it's free basic education, whether it's NSFAS for tertiary education, or even more recently, the National Health Insurance as a foundation for universal healthcare.
Yeah.
We really want to ensure that the GNU adopts the transformation mandate as its mandate going forward. So I think for us, those are the kind of key principles.
So as we continue exploring the scenarios that might play out, in the event of the culmination of a government of national unity, how does Cosatu then plan to engage with the ANC and the SACP to really ensure that the GNU remains focused on the needs of the working class, but also to avoid pitfalls observed in local government coalitions?
Yeah, no, that's exactly the critical point. We have to make sure we get the principles right. There has to be mechanisms to ensure that when disputes, when disagreements arise, because now you might be dealing with several political parties. They might have different ideologies, policy platforms, etc. Hence, they are different parties. So you need to find mechanisms to resolve those kind of disputes. Because what you can't afford is what you see, for example, in Nelson Mandela Bay or Johannesburg, where you change mayors every few months. That we can't see at a national level. Not when you look at what national deals with, the budgets, the taxes, legislation, service delivery at a huge scale. So we've got to make sure it's stable, it's coherent. We have to make sure there's a very clear policy platform and there's mechanisms to deal with disputes which don't involve causing instability. We can't afford, for example, some small political parties choosing to blackmail the ANC if they don't get the way. So you need to find ways to resolve it. Of course, for us as Cosatu, and I'm sure for the SACP without speaking for them, it's also means even greater need to strengthen the alliance. So we're able to caucus, to concretize common positions with the ANC as alliance partners. Also see how do we give support to the ANC in its critical work going forward, given the challenges. And we need to see what are the practical modalities to make sure that the alliance programs, the ANC elections manifesto, ultimately carry fruit and become the policy platform for the state.
But what specific policies or actions does Cosatu want to see implemented to really address the current socio-economic challenges facing South Africa, particularly those affecting workers and the poor?
Yeah. So many of the issues are stuff that's already begun under the outgoing administration of President Ramaphosa. Fixing Eskom so we have reliable and affordable electricity, because that's key for every single workplace or parts of the economy. It's about making sure Transnet Freight Rail and the ports are run efficiently, because that's key to big critical sectors of the economy like mining and manufacturing, agriculture. It's also about fixing local government, because we see many companies closing in rural towns because those municipalities are not providing basic services. And whilst we grow the economy, including through the industrial master plans with government and business, we also have to make sure we give relief to the poor. So the SRD grant is a powerful platform, the foundation for a basic income grant. There's other issues too about the social wage, investments in schools and hospitals and so forth. But you also have got to break the back of youth unemployment. You can't sustain a society where 59% of young people don't have work. So the Presidential Employment Program has been a very powerful way of getting young people into the economy. We would really want to see in the medium-term budget statement in October at Parliament that it be increased drastically to accommodate at least 2 million young people consistently to help get them into the economy. The most powerful part of the ANC's election manifesto is about ramping up local procurement, industrialization. That's the most sustainable way of creating jobs. So we really need to see in the budget again that huge amounts of resources are being shifted to boost manufacturing industries to help support SMEs, because we can't continue with this rate of unemployment of 41%. That's just a ticking time bomb. And of course, other issues too about increasing the fight against crime and corruption. We've seen some progress there, but not enough. We need to see more. And of course, reinforcing South African Revenue Service too, because if you can collect the tax owed to the state, that generates the revenues the state needs to fund the very public services we're talking about.
Now, Matthew, there's also the perception that the ANC might be warming up to parties like the DA, for instance. What are your views as Cosatu on the potential inclusion of the Democratic Alliance in a coalition government, also given their stance on labor laws and economic policy as well?
Yeah, no, we would be very wary about a coalition, and I don't think you'll find any appetite for it. A coalition between the ANC and the DA, from Cosatu, from the trade union movement, because the DA since 1994 in its different permutations has consistently voted against every single labor law Parliament has ever passed. In the DA's recent election manifesto, they spoke about scrapping the minimum wage, collapsing collective bargaining, scrapping all the labor laws, which are so critical to ensuring workers have the right to go to a safe working place, they have the right to maternity leave, etc. I think for us, that's the key issues. So the ANC has spoken quite clearly already that they're not going to go into a coalition government, not with the DA, not with the other parties. They're going to go in a different model, which is a government of national unity. So that basically means, in simple terms, that any political party is invited to the government. We need to engage with the ANC to see what exactly are the policy requirements. We need to ensure that any party which enters that government has to respect workers' labor rights, has to respect the transformation mandate. Because if any party doesn't respect that, then for us, that's a no-go territory. Any political party, too, has got to speak to the issue of the campaign against crime and corruption, the campaign in support of renewing society, cleansing society, etc. So I think we would want to know those are put in place. But I think we also need to make sure that if a political party is allowed to join a GNU, it does not have the right on other political parties to join it as well, because that then becomes a coalition. A GNU, like we had in 1994, meant that all political parties who achieved a certain policy threshold or who wanted to join the GNU would be invited. But I think for us, there are different modalities, there are different permutations, and I think also the critical principles we've got to make sure in place as a trade union federation that respect workers' rights, and that's why we're going to be engaging with the ANC and the SCCP to get a better understanding of their views, and also for them to hear our views too about our concerns and what we think would work and what we think may not work.
So Matthew, your members and your affiliates will be watching these developments very closely. What message does Cosatu have for workers and the general public, also as the nation navigates these turbulent political and economic times? And what actions can workers take to really safeguard their rights and interests as well?
Yeah. Look, I think for us right now, these are uncharted territories, everybody, but I don't think we should stress too much on the fact is that no government can be formed without the ANC leading it. Mathematically, it's not actually possible, and the President Cyril Ramaphosa would be leading it. So there's going to be, in most instances, a path of continuity. The ANC election manifesto will, in essence, be the policy platform for the state, but we have to make sure we get the principles right about constitutionalism, the rule of law, fight against crime and corruption, and of course, critically for workers, about respecting workers' rights, the social wage, the transformation mandate. And I think workers should rest assured that Cosatu is going to push that. We are confident the ANC will agree with us because of our alliance, because of our historical relationships, and because the ANC shares similar views to it, and they've made some similar comments and commitments already, but we will concretize it. I think the key thing also to assure the public about is that we must have a stable government. We can't afford to have an incoherent government. We can't afford to see corruption coming back through poor choices in government or to see workers' rights being eroded. So I think for us, those are the critical things. It is going to be a learning curve for the nation, but I think ultimately we will get through it. But we need to do so quite quickly because our problems are about unemployment, about poverty, about inequality, about load shedding, about the trains not working, the ports being congested, corruption, etc. So we've got to really make sure we have a stable government quite soon. The president will be inaugurated on 22nd of June, and we need the new government to be hitting the ground running and to really focus on the job at hand. What we can't afford is the circus we see at times in local government level, where mayors are focusing on what cars are they driving, not about servicing working class communities.
Thank you so much for your time. That's Cosatu's Matthew Parks sharing the Trade Union Federation's perspective on the formation of a government of national unity and the critical issues facing the working class in South Africa.